Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's a real one. I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed. It's a science thing. It's a science place. It's a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. Welcome once more to the one, the only...
Protonic Reversal.
Holy moly. Have I got one for you. This is going to be a good show. Episode 143. Mr. Mike Watt. Minutemen. fIREHOSE. All the solo records. MSSV. The freaking Stooges. Are you kidding me? I have been trying to make this happen for literally years. So I'm as excited as you are. We're just going to get right to it. So let's hear a Minutemen song. Then we'll talk to Mike Watt. What? All right. Needless to say, I'm stoked. Here we go.
List monitors are right with petition. I have this philosophy. Is your life worth the painting? Is this girl versus boy with different symbol? Being born is power. Scout leader, Nazi tag, this big sin. Your risk, change me hostage. Me, I'm fighting with my head. I'm not ambiguous. I must look like a dork. Me, naked with textbook poems, found against the Nazis. The weird kind of sex symbol. It's speeches that are big dance thumbs. If we heard mortar shells, we cuss more in our songs and cut down the guitar solos. So dig this big crux. Organizing the Boy Scout for murder is wrong. 10 years beyond the big sweat point. Man, it was still there ever without you. Coming back around. Look, we're coming together for just a second. A peek, a guess. At the wholeness, it's way too big. At the wholeness, it's way too big.
Hey, Conan.
Hey, brother. So can you hear me okay? Is everything coming through? Okay, cool. Let me just do a quick...
I do this all the time when I do my Watt from Pedro show.
I was going to say, I know you're certainly no novice to doing this kind of thing, so...
Yeah, and it's econo, and it's a lot easier than using a phone to record. You just have another pewter running the fucking Skype shit.
Yeah, and it's interesting... It's interesting. So that's a good place to start. What do you think about, using tech and things along those lines for, I don't know, for lack of a better term, kind of punk rock purposes like this? It kind of seems like there's a lot of tools to do that, right?
Conan, come on, go back to Minutemen days. Go back. We Jam Econo was not just the slogan; it was a way of life. How are we going to get to the gigs if we don't have the boat? Need a little bit of tech. That's the way it's yielded, is like with a butter knife. You can butter the toast or stab your buddy.
Good point.
Make a big mess out of it, too, right? It's a butter knife, so
Yeah, I was gonna say that'd be a slow way to go for sure. Sometimes that's how I feel like how politics are.
Right, but if you were going to be that fucking vicious about it instead of just butter and toast, same thing. We use tech. For example, this Skype thing here, Estonian software developers, but I think Shite owns it now.
Yeah,
right?
they bought them out I think 5 years ago or something like that.
Conan, as long as they don't jump on the line and tell us what to say, we don't hang up, right? So the idea is we got to preserve the autonomy, but somehow use whatever the T word where we can.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, and it's kind of been a discussion topic on this show about how there's sort of like this idea that all this stuff brings us freedom, but it's sort of like freedom, but do what we say by a lot of these corporations. But there's still ways to kind of get up and around for those that are willing to put in the effort.
It seems to me a lot of human stuff has this dangling duality aspect to it. It depends on the wielder.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And that's where the responsibility is, I think, because it's hard, many levels removed. How much power do you have in that, right? But we kind of do where we ourselves are wielding this kind of stuff. How are we using this stuff? Okay, that's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
I thought for sure we'd all have our own websites. I don't know why we'd all collect, gather like fucking herd at the fake look and the Instagram and the shitter. Not that. I mean, the way I look at they're like telephone poles to put up flyers, but to make a fucking, you know what I'm saying? Those ethics develop with fanzines. It's beyond just the tech or whatever, the paper, the staples from Kinko's. To me, it's the same thing as having your own website. There's no middleman. There's no gatekeeper. You're unfiltered. You let your freak flag fly.
Right, and I'm a big advocate of that myself. I know you are. Of course, the Hoot page has been going for for a long time. It's an amazing one-stop resource for all things Watt. I'm always kind of surprised that, especially younger bands don't.
I got these ideas though from the early days of the movement. Flipside, Slash. These the fanzines were huge fabric. Especially in the U.S., the movement was pretty small. So the fanzine was incredible fabric to hook us together, especially different towns and shit.
Yeah, and it's not that much different with putting something up on the internet, right? Like you can connect with people.
I was talking about was ethic, right? They travel. Yeah, they it's ways of behaving, right? They've traveled beyond the little acute thing in the moment. What kind of devices are being used? It's more of the ideas behind them. What are you trying to represent? What are you trying to do with your life?
Right. And the idea of, finding communities and sort of like-minded folks and artists and bands and stuff and using that as a communication tool to connect. I mean, it's kind of vital, right?
In some ways, there's some traditions, I would say, like vaudeville, the idea of working towns. There was a time when things weren't centralized. There was no movies, television, or radio. So the farmers, their little towns, they had to wait till the guys came and did the gigs.
Right.
It was, again, more fabric to connect humans in a way that's not so fucking fascist and, boot on the throat kind of deals.
Well, and there was a chance that if you didn't see that act, you might never see it again. It wasn't like you could just fire up the old YouTube and go check it out the next day if you didn't feel like going out, too.
Yeah, so maybe there's some advantages about the bad new days. You can use a YouTube.com to see that. But on the other hand, there's something really vital about seeing something in the moment, huh?
Absolutely, and I think that there's no replacing that. And so I guess that's a good thing to go with on you, because you've been there through all of this, kind of like they say that it's water. Like, was it David Foster Wallace, right? And you've seen it like from the jump as far as for the punk rock folks. And how do you feel that relationship's changed? Has it changed? Like between artists?
A lot of ways the movement was kind of our kind of, I don't know, age group actually finding out about shit that Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis was giving us in the 50s. I think the arena rock, because I know this from 125 months serving with the Stooges, there was a huge garage band scene in the 60s and a lot of local labels and stuff, but it got destroyed by arena rock. And so in a way, our movement in the 70s, punk scene, was kind of waking up to those old things, reinventing stuff. Or somebody once told me the only thing new is you finding out about it. And then movements even before that, right? Woody Guthrie.
Sure. Yeah.
Walt Whitman, Dada, Surrealism, Futurism, all these kind of weird trips of expression. A lot of these things seem like links in a chain. And I don't mean chain as like anti-liberation, but that's something. It's a connection, I'm trying to say.
It's a connected thread. It's a through line. And I'm there with you on that. And it's, well, so, and we were talking about, I was talking about this with another guest. I honestly don't remember who at this point, but
it's okay.
There's a lot of folks are getting into sort of like these sort of heavy drone bands, but it's like an experiential thing, right? Because you go to it, you know, it's loud, it's big, like, you know, it takes like...
You mean like Sun-O?
Yeah, and it takes, I was going to say, it takes like 2 minutes for a chord change, like whatever, like, but it's a thing that can't be replaced by going on the computer. You're going there in person, and you're experiencing it. Like, there's nothing that's going to change, like, that's coming at you.
I had a trippy experience like that in New York City. There was something called it was Lamont Young, right? The Dream House or the Dream. He's got this piece that's going like 7, 8, 9 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was like, he's got this idea of, you know, because temper, right? The way things are tuned, the way notes are divided up. There's a lot of debate over this, especially with more modern pioneer types in music. So he's got this big fat chords going with these synthesizers constantly for years.
Right.
And you go up there, it was August or something, so really sweaty, 5th or 6th floor. I hobbled up there and just laid on the deck in this big fat chord. So maybe there's a whole tradition of this kind of stuff. I think it might go back to the wind. And also ocean, because I live here, you know, by the water here.
Yeah, tides. Yeah.
You know, the surf is always making this sound, right? The pounding. Yeah. And it like a big giant chord, especially when it gets going with the wind. So maybe that drone thing has always been with us.
That's really interesting. And it's... I
think the dancing is kind of connected to the first instruments, which I think is the drum. I think our pounding on the ground was the first instrument. And also singing, or the voice.
Right, because that's something that, you know, you don't need amplifiers to do that. You don't need, you don't need any of the rest of the stuff.
Some kind of chants and mantras that are pretty droney.
So,
you know, like these Guyota monk guys with the throat singing.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a connect to that, even though it's, kind of Black Sabbath imagery and funny outfits and stuff. But maybe there's a real something with some kind of integrity, a connect that goes way back with us that likes not so much change. We like this drone, this ambient.
Yeah, and, you know, maybe that's something that, like, is just like an integral part of the human experience, and this is how it's manifesting for folks now that, you know, come up.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's juxtaposed against being all aware of every microsecond, of every change, of every little awareness moment awake. Maybe it's the opposite, the antithesis of that, so it's a good counterpoint.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. That's actually a really cool way of looking at it. And, you know, that art piece you mentioned, I think it's awesome, too, because it's sort of like you can, like, set your calendar appointment to remind you when the chord's going to change, you know? go check it out.
Right.
Get a 1 week reminder.
There's some songs. I don't know, Harry Nilsson?
Oh, yeah, of course.
He had a tune called The Lime and the Coconut.
Yep.
It's C7. The whole fucking song's one part.
I guess it is, huh? I never thought about it.
Yeah, even Guess Who, American Woman, it's one fucking part. They play it a couple times different, but it's one part. Sometimes you don't need change. I think that's the whole idea of the prayer, the mantra.
Yeah, folks.
And a lot of nature seems to be in these big ass loops, these big rhythms that take a long ass time to loop on himself. For example, the year, right, going around the sun. Man, that's kind of a weight.
Yeah, that's a hell of a measure.
That's Earth. Think about fucking, I think Saturn's 29 and a half years.
Yes, it's pretty great. Like if someone says they just celebrated their third birthday, it's quite the momentous event if they're human.
Yeah. So all that shit gets kind of relative. So on that gig that you're experiencing, you know, I think they're asking you to like pay attention to different kinds of things. Let go of that need. You know, you can write a novel without inventing one word, and it still can be kind of original.
Right, because context is everything. I mean, it's
absolutely.
It's not.
So it's they're playing that fuck chord, right?
Well, I'd also say it's just like when you and D. Boone started Minutemen. You know, it wasn't necessarily. There's antecedents to what you were doing, but it was the way that you did it is because it was you guys doing it that made it work and made it what it was.
Yeah, some of that shit was one part. Joe McCarthy's Ghost is one part.
But that's a killer song, and it works, you know? Like so.
Sometimes another part can kind of ruin it.
If it's a good part, I mean, hey.
Yeah, if it's a good part, okay. You know, that's, you know, and then on the other side of it, there's, you know, my fucking third opera with, you know, 30 parts, and each part's got 5. Yeah, God, that was hard to fucking get together.
So, yeah, I mean, like, and
play in front of people, you know, without written down. We had to memorize that whole motherfucker.
Yeah, so
but,
that's
there's a huge tradition of that. Humans in the old days, right? I think the Iliad and Odyssey for hundreds of years was oral before it was written down.
Sure, I mean, that's how you get, like, well, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's so trippy when people say, well, that's the word of God with the Bible. It's like, man, these stories were told over and over again. Some of them by this guy's friends. I mean, gee, come on. You think it's going to stay the same?
There's nothing written to compare them against, so they were always dynamic and changing with the moment. Yeah.
So, but as far as how in regards to your work, that's interesting that you bring it up because, you know, some of the stuff you've done, obviously you've pushed out different directions, tried different things. You know, compositionally, how does that all come together for you? Because you kind of...
I think the bass is an interesting instrument to use for composition. I mean, it's not really... Yeah, it's not... It's usually the last thing added unless you're in a reggae or R&B band.
Yeah, especially in rock.
Yeah, right. There was always a strict hierarchy, and most of the compositions done... Even jazz, I was reading, you know, Charlie Mingus is Beneath the Underdog. He never composed on the bass. He always did it on the piano. Now, the thing about the piano and the guitar composing on, there's a lot of harmonic information there. And with the bass guitar, when you compose on that, you're actually letting your collaborators be a lot more free with how they realize how to voice them chords. I mean, we got the start and the stop and the rhythms and all that, but we leave the harmonic stuff kind of up to our collaborators. Guys like Nels Cline love it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's perfect for him.
I've tried to play with it. It's like, man, that's like you're trying to write a song on the kick drum, man, or the cymbals. Not enough information. Other people, they like it because it's got that lack of information.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the player.
It's weird being about composition, you know. There's the guy who thinks up of all the parts, but then kind of the tradition I come from is, no, it's not realized. I'll give you a song. I'll give you verse, chorus, bridge, all that stuff. But it's more like a launch pad, more like a springboard. This is how we're going to start off, and then we're going to see what happens when you bring your stuff to the party. That's the way I compose using the bass guitar.
And that can be a nice surprise that way too, right? I mean, especially if you trust the players you're with.
Well, you know, I did it with D. Boone big time because we grew up playing. I never had to teach D. Boone a song. I just played it for him.
Yeah.
Because we grew up together, so it kind of osmosis thing. But then after that, I tried it again with Nels Cline in my first opera, Contemplating the Engine Room. And he realized that whole thing. You know, I wrote that whole trip without letting him or Hodge, the drummer man, even hear it. So I revealed it one part at a time. And these guys, and I wouldn't use music words to tell the tale. You know, I wanted them to try to feel it out with their instruments. And, you know, the bass can do that.
Right. And it all depends on how you play it too. You know, it's certainly you have an expressive way of playing.
I'm using it as this kind of composition thing here.
Yeah.
I'm using it as the first thing. I also did it with it's funny, they called it my solo record, but there was 48 different people.
I was going to say it's guest star galore, but yeah.
Well, bass players like this, you know, we're like glue. And what's glue with nothing to stick to, you know, just a puddle. So you need the other cats. And that was the whole idea of that record. I thought if the bass player knew the song, that anybody could come play drums and guitar and sing. It wasn't like saying the bass was more important, but like the bass is kind of crucial if you want it to be.
Well, and what was such a trip about that record is that it sounded thematically similar. Like it sounded almost like a comp tape or something, but it sounded like a band too, even though it was different people singing. Like it really worked well because of that.
I think it ended up as being 17 different bands.
Yeah. Jesus.
But yeah, the one common thing was the bass player. So that's saying something there, Conan. If you think they kind of had something that joined them all together, then I think that Petri dish experiment was a success. Well, maybe I was more the tugboat and less of the ball hog.
Well, and that's because that was the whole idea with the title, right? Because it was
that was it. You know, what am I going to be? Am I going to be some fake lead guitar, or I'm going to be really a fucking essential Aiden and a better?
And you know, you're obviously, as anyone that knows you knows, you're from Pedro, and you know,
not originally. I came here when I was 9. I'm from Virginia
originally, but as far as from musically,
I'd say 52 years. No, 53 years now.
Yeah, we can probably say you're a resident at this point, right?
Belong to the San Pedro Bay Historical Society. For a number of years, I probably know more about Pedro than people born here.
And for those not in the know, you know, it's this kind of a shipping town. Like there's boats.
Well, it's the harbor of Los Angeles. In fact, we're the biggest harbor of the United States. Us in Long Beach.
So
Long Beach is the east side. We're the west side. Wilmington's the north side. Where actually 3 different neighborhoods share the harbor of Los Angeles in Long Beach.
So, I mean, do you feel like that informed?
We were really lucky. I mean, it was a weird, perfect storm. That's why I came here from Virginia. You know, that's the biggest Navy base in the world, but it's a lot closer to Vietnam here. My papa was a machinist mate in the Navy. Well, a few years of that stuff, and finally that war ended. Mao Zedong died, so China was open for business. And this invention called the can, right, the shipping container, actually came out of New Jersey, a company called Sealand, a guy named Mr. McMillan. Basically, it's a railroad boxcar without the trucks. But this changed all the shipping. And then, like I said, about China being open for business, and then the war over, it doesn't have to be a Navy base here. It can be a container terminal. So that changed our whole harbor. You know, what we were before that, we were the tuna industry for about 50, 60 years. Chicken of the sea, Star-Kissed, all that was from here. Tuna used to be like cat food, and then somebody thought of putting mayonnaise with it, and it became chicken. Tuna. People used it on their lunchtime, right?
Right.
And it was, we had over 500 fishing boats, but of course we fished all the tuna, so it destroyed that industry.
Yeah, whoops.
I know. Well, you look at the flag of Lebanon, right? The cedar tree. There's no cedar trees.
Yeah.
Cut it all down. Humans have done this mistake over and over again.
So there's a lot of nautical imagery in a lot you do. And
Pop was a sailor, right?
Yeah.
And he did 20 years in the Navy, and he didn't understand why I kept playing after D. Boone got killed, you know. He knew it was something that we did as boys to be together. But so I started sending postcards. He didn't know I was making a living at music. So I started sending postcards from tour, and he couldn't believe I was playing all these parts.
Right.
Arkansas shit, you know, from his Father's Day, right? Arkansas, you know, like Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard days, it was pretty heavy, right? And I said, no, things have changed a little bit, Bob. And so, but he said, you know, in a way, you're like a sailor. And this is where I got my whole idea for the first opera. You know, that maybe there is, even though in some ways, way different life than my father's, but maybe this idea of getting in a vehicle and working towns, sort of like what he was doing.
Going to different harbors and going to port.
Right.
And that's how you started calling the van the boat, right? I mean, that's sort of natural correlation.
Absolutely. There was a book, too, by Richard McKenna, the only novel this guy wrote. He was a machinist mate in the 1920s in the U.S. Navy in China that time, and he wrote a book called The Sand Pebbles. And I used a lot of that in the first opportunity. Well, I couldn't believe it when we were boys, it was me and D. Boone's favorite movie. It had Steve McQueen, 1966. But we couldn't understand what it was fucking about. But Steve McQueen in a sailor suit, right?
Yeah. You're still in, just at the precinct.
Absolutely. And then we found this, I did, with Porno for Pyros. I was on tour, and I found out there was actually a book it was made out of. And I couldn't believe the book. I knew it was written by a sailor, and sure enough, I found out this guy spent 23 years in the Navy. So I just found a lot of things, just like I was talking to you about vaudeville. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of parallels in this work with vaudeville and with being a sailor. Yeah,
and I think that also ties into your whole perceived ethos of it being kind of like like what'd you say for Minutemen? Like there's the flyers in the show, right? Like same thing.
We divided the world into gigs and flyers, and anything that wasn't a gig was a flyer to get people to that gig. We were just, because we came from arena rock, so when we saw those first punk gigs, the Bags and the Germs, we couldn't believe it, and so we thought the gig was everything,
right?
Everything, the moment of. In the moment stuff of watching a band play, there was nothing in between that band and you. Like they were dealing with the listener without any filter, any kind of Bogart or bum rush. We just thought that's what we wanted to be part of. So we thought everything was about the gig. So anything you did, like a picture or a record or an interview, a spiel or something, that was a flyer in a way to get people to the gig so they could experience you and your buddy trying to express themselves with their own voice on their instruments.
And it can be a trip for, kids coming up now to understand that, it wasn't like how it is now, where you could just, push a couple buttons and like, oh, what's this all about? Like, it was a thing, it's cliche to say it, but you did have to be there to see it and experience it.
Yeah, and also, like I said, we were reacting against the arena rock, where they gave you a seat in the dark, you're a mile away. I didn't even know the bass had fucking bigger strings. I was so far away. And when you go to a club, and, you watch this band, like, for example, the Germs playing this super original, you never heard this before, and you can see Lorna's bass. Yeah, she's got big strings. That's why there's only 4.
Right.
And then when they get this, Conan, they get done playing, and there's Pat Smear standing right next to you, and you can rap with this guy. I mean, that's not arena rock.
Right.
That's a whole another way. It's almost like they were taking turns playing in front of each other. It was way different than, here's the altar, here's the pews.
Yeah, and that's something that, you said before, and I've certainly identified with, that, it wasn't about there being, person on stage, like a different breed, they're like a demigod or something. It's like, no, you're just taking turns being in the audience, being on the stage.
Yeah, which seems kind of like really obvious and simple, but if you only know arena rock, it's almost a fucking revelation.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a total mind blow. And so that's why we embraced the movement, even though it was not very popular. Most people hated us for joining this crew. That's why I like nowadays. People are so much more open-minded about it. It's no problem. People who go to Berklee School of Music have no problem with you being a punk rocker. That was nothing 40 years ago like that.
Yeah, it was when they, people talk about things being a lifestyle choice, but, no joke.
Man.
It was a different world.
Bands like AC/DC didn't like punk.
Yeah.
And to me, there's hardly any difference, Well, for me, actually, the movement wasn't a style of music. It was more of a state of mind. Style of music was up to every band. There's a million ways to be a punk band, in my mind. maybe in other people they're not that free about it. But the way I look at it, there's but you're born with a different fingerprint. Then we got to spend a lifetime proving to each other. On one hand, we're completely unique, but on the other hand, so much in common at the same time. More of that dangling duality stuff, Conan.
Yeah, and I think that's something that when they talk about, the history of punk, like a lot of times, maybe not so much now, but like bands like the Screamers and stuff were kind of written out of history because it didn't fit the narrative.
Yeah, right. No guitar.
Right, and I think
they were like the first band that could probably sell out the whiskey. The biggest punk band we had in our scene didn't even have a guitar.
and to me,
why not? Suicide didn't have one.
Yep.
Up in the city, No Mercy. That was two ladies, one singer, one drummer. Zev, this guy hung pieces of metal. That would almost kill him as he beating the shit out of the stuff. Right. I mean, anything. Well, why not? Because things have been gotten so rote and so unsurprising and unmind-blowing. We needed a reaction to that, I think.
So do you feel that attitude still exists with like newer bands and that you see out there?
Of course. Yeah, of course. Of course. Once that door got pushed open, it never really got slammed back shut. Because the idea of the Nuremberg rally, which is kind of got, I hate to say it, but arena rock's got roots in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a way we don't need to come together in big fucking things like that. There's a bunch of sickness and danger about the way we do come together via the internet, but at least it ain't in those silly kind of situations that are physical like that. So you can have intimate kind of things, right? People have their own YouTube.com channels. They have their own websites. I mean, there are some kind of things that are fighting against that homogenous herd thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's, not to put too fine a point on it, that's what I try to do with this show. Whatever small way, like one
right.
patch in the
avoid,
quilt.
Right?
It's just one small piece of a bigger whole, But
in the old days, what you have to do, you had to have a bumper sticker on your car. That's the only way you could get heard, and hopefully some guy driving behind you gets the idea or some right. We didn't have, or maybe there were some lyrics in some songs, or there was a different way of sharing in the old days.
Well, yeah, I mean, just that, even that, what is it? Don't Mess with Texas. That was actually started as an anti-littering campaign, and people don't even know that now.
Yeah, it was on the side. Actually, the signs doubled as like Bridges Ice before. They would fold it down in the summertime.
Right.
Yeah. So, kind of a twofer.
Yeah, economy, right?
People took it on as, they missed the point. It was like, and it's really ridiculous too. Like, you have to tell people not to litter.
Yeah.
That's, no shitting on people's chests. No slavery. You have to tell people this kind of shit. I can't believe humans in a way. Yeah, but I guess you do. I saw one. We were last tour. I just did a tour this fall, my 67th one. It was 45 gigs at 45 days. It was 13,380 miles. I drove every one of them. But we were us in the boat. We're comparing the different fines for littering.
Oh, to the different states. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because 10th Amendment, right? So anything in the Constitution, the states handle it. Yep. So I guess that goes for litter fines. And like one state had like a $6,200, maybe $50. I don't know where they get this number, but I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, just kind of somebody's picked up an arbitrary, very high number.
6,250, like almost a feet in a mile, except another 1,000 or something. I don't know where they got that number, but anything for people.
So who?
And then you'll have people complain why they can't get their plastic straw.
So who was the lowest and who was the highest? Do you remember?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's perception is 9/10 of the law. Who's a snowflake? Who's losing? Who's winning?
Yeah.
People worry about the most silly ass shit. In the meantime, you got a plastic patch the size of Texas in the Pacific Ocean.
Right, exactly. That plastic island that so many people don't even know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, how'd that get there, Yeah,
I wonder. Well, so you brought up an interesting point. You do all the driving when you tour, right?
Yeah, I did on this one here.
Has that always been the case? Have you normally like?
My hands get sore doing the bass. That's why I play short scale for gigs. And there's something vibrating on the wheels that kind of helps.
So is that something, do you feel like that's like you're the captain of the ship, so you're going to be the one at the helm, or is it just kind of more comfortable?
Conan, I got a bad knee.
Yeah.
I was born with bad knees, and then this port side got hurt in a Stooges gig 10 years ago. And so I can't really do a lot of the schlepping of the gear and stuff, so I try to pull my weight behind the wheel. It's not really trying to be the boss. It's more like, what can I do to help the whole mission, right? I can work the bass, some spiel. I can work the driver wheel. I got a cart, so I can get all my bass stuff on the shine cart and get it around. But, I'm a coal, I'm a cripple, and so I try to it's kind of a compensator.
Well, and obviously, it's been a while since that injury, but I mean, that is a life change. You got to think about that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of used. I was born with, it's kind of a gift. I found there was a family thing, and I saw some relatives, some cousins from Denmark. My father's mother was from Denmark, and these people had fucked up knees like me, so I thought, oh, that's where it came from.
it's a little
oh yeah, right. You inherit certain things.
Genetic landmine waiting for you.
Yeah, but hey, it's better than slinging a colostomy sack. You got to keep the shit in proportion, right? But if you ask me about why I do the driving, that's why I'm trying to compensate in ways where I can't help the band in other ways, like schlep big shit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's you mentioned
it's not supposed to be a hair shirt. I'm not trying to do penance or shit like that. I'm just trying to do pull my weight.
Well, I mean, and it's to each their own strengths, and that also applies to when someone can shore up something that maybe someone else is not so great at, then that's why it's a band and not I've never liked the term project for that exact reason, because project implies that there's sort of more autonomy going on with it, whereas with a band it's like you're banding together. It's everyone's kind of pitching in to accomplish a goal.
Yeah, but okay, you want to get all Wittgenstein about the semantic. A proj can be a band.
It can.
Okay.
Not
like that's the proj. We're going to act like we're together in a band.
Yeah, like
to me, a proj is anytime you get together with somebody else, and there's many, many different ways to do that. Sometimes you give the direction, sometimes you take the direction, sometimes you part out the direction.
So, and you actually just reminded me, I wanted to ask you about those cats you were playing with, the Il Sogno del Mariano. I probably mispronounced that.
El Sogno del Marinaio.
Oh, fuck. I'm sorry. I took German.
El Sogno del Marinaio. It's a little like Spanish. Spanish would be El Sueño del Marinero. So they're kind of close, but it means a sailor's dream.
So your band was Stefano and Paolo.
Now, it ain't really my band. I was asked, this is a collaboration. I was asked to join two Italian guys.
Right.
So I'm actually a part of an European band with two Italians, and I only write about a third of the stuff. So it's different than a band with Mike Watt in the name. Because I want you to know who to blame, so I'll put my name there, because I give all the second man and the missing. So I want you to know who to blame. But something that has a name, and especially something with like an Italian name, Watt's only a part, and he's not the shot caller. He ain't the capo,
Well, and to credit where credit's due, I may have stolen that quote because it's Conan, Neutron, and the Secret Friends for my band, and I might have said like, yeah, that's how you know who to blame. I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think we're coming from the same place on it.
Yeah, so you met these fellas, and they're
but I'm also saying at the same time, I found that life is about taking turns. You're in different roles. Even a guy at the factory, getting a beat down on the assembly line. He comes home and he's kind of running the pad, maybe, or maybe he's got some kind of collaboration with his wife. Maybe it's a lot more fair than down at the factory. I'm saying there's different roles,
yep.
And the same thing with music. I think it's healthy. For one thing, I know, or I'm a pretty good belief that if you're always the boss, you're not going to learn everything.
Totally.
It's going to get your fucking way.
So So these fellows come at you from Florence. Like, how does this start up?
Bologna, actually.
Okay, sorry.
But they're close. That's Emilia Romagna, and the other one is Tuscany, right?
Yeah,
so
Tuscany,
they're next to each other. They're next to each other.
Okay.
But Bologna is kind of in the middle. They call it the train town, but that's where these guys are. And they went to school. You know, they're the very accomplished musicians, about 20 years younger. And they asked me to be kind of an avant-garde. They like to play in strange times, which is very difficult for me. But it's been about 10 years now. More than 10 years I've been playing with them. We just getting to mix the third album now that we recorded in Pedro last year. It's called Terzo. And it's mainly the guitarist, Stefano Paglia. It's mainly his project, but he's way into collaborating and coming together with the different guys. We've gone through. We're on the second drummer now, Paolo Mongardi. Andrea Belfi played on the first two albums, so this is the first album with Paolo Mongardi, and really kind of interesting, you know. And it's trippy to be in a European band.
Yeah, I was going to ask how that cultural divide, or not divide necessarily, but how's that play out?
There's a divide, but like most human things, for everything unique, there's a lot in common. So you do see the divide, but then you also see, despite all the miles, the language, the culture, there's still a lot in common. You know, that's the way I like about arts. It's nuanced. It shows you differences, but then at the same time, togetherness. It's really interesting that way. Of course, it's done in different things. It's different than my Second Men. It's different than my Missing Men. It's different than me and the Stooges. It's different than even this new project I got with Mike Baguetta and Steve Hodges called MSSV.
Right.
Means stop valve. This is a guy, last month, I made an album with them. He wrote all my bass lines.
Oh, whoa.
I have not been in that situation except for like where you replace the dead guy and you play old songs.
Like the Stooges, yeah.
For example, the Stooges or even Porto for Pyro. Martine wasn't dead, but he was not that healthy at the time.
Yeah, he wasn't up for playing, so yeah.
Yeah, he is now. I mean, he's great shape, but at that little moment, and I could help those guys out, but that still was learning another guy's stuff, right?
Yeah, same principle.
But here, I'm not learning another guy's stuff. I'm actually learning stuff some guy wrote for me to be part of this trio. I've never been in all my years. I've never been in that situation.
So was he like writing it towards what he perceived your bass voice to be, or was it just like, hey, here's the thing?
Well, I'll tell you, it seemed kind of easy to play. It seemed like, he was engineering it that way for me.
Yeah.
Well, I had already made an album the year before with Jim Keltner on drums with him, and I think he picked up, and we did a tour together with Hodge on drums because Mr. Keltner can't tour so much. But I think both those experiences gave him a sense of what Watt's like, and so he wrote Watt things. But me personally, I've never been in that sitch before. It's the first time for me. But the more the merrier, the more roles. I don't know whether that guy in Stratford-upon-Avon wrote the plays, but that thing, life is a stage of many roles and shit. I think that might be applied to a lot of work, but especially the arts.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, it's good to take different roles. I think each one gives you a different perspective, and so you can take away different kind of lessons.
So
I really believe life is a classroom. That was the whole idea of the third opera. It's not just college, high school, grade school, and that shit.
It never stops.
Yeah, especially, and it's one of the good things. It's not
exactly. It's not something to get bummed out by. Yeah.
It's not a B word.
Yeah, and and I certainly think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. And I think it's very clear to anyone remotely paying attention that whether all the lessons may not be great, but like there's certainly plenty to learn, throughout life.
Well, you're very kind. I mean, I'm just trying to share with you these ideas about these projects.
Yeah. So tell me,
I try to make them reruns. Like another recent project I'm involved with is the Jump-Started Plowhards. And this again is another interesting exploration with the bass guitar. This guy runs Recess Records, a Torrance guy, moved to Pedro in the 90s, wanted to be part of, I guess, our scene, which blew my mind because, us Minutemen were the only punk rockers. I couldn't believe 20 years later there'd be a scene. But anyway, I did a little tour with him, and I said, hey, how about I write you a bunch of songs on the bass, and you play guitar and sing, and the only thing I want you to do is use a different drummer for each tune. And so he went for it. He fucking went for it. He brought it. I put it out there, and he went for it. And, there's nothing another artist could do for another artist than fucking be sincerely inspired.
Yeah,
by
dig in.
Yes, isn't it the biggest, pat on the back or whatever, instead of a schmooze, to be inspired by an artwork that you decided to share?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean,
couldn't ask for a better thing.
I never get more fired up to play or to do something creative than after I see something really great, whether it's like a great band or, some sort of like visual art or something. It makes you want to it makes you remember that's all part of a greater whole, and it kind of fires up some synapses in the brain to do some more cool stuff.
Exactly. And again, the tunes I wrote, launch pads, springboards, no end realized on purpose because they're supposed to be, like the name, jumpstart. Let's get this going, and now plow hard. Right. Not a blow hard, not like the boss we got right now. Not a blow hard, but a plow.
Yeah, man. we could do a whole show on that.
I've had dudes who did spiels with me, and I don't know, they don't want to see the P, they want to see a B there, so they get called blowhard, but it's plow. It's plow hard.
They're expecting it to be blowhard.
Well, these times we're in, there's a lot of hard. There's a lot of blowhard.
As a sidebar for that, when we're talking about the man in the Oval Office, I make a special point to not mention that dude as much as possible because that he gets a raging hard microphallus erection every time his name is mentioned, whether it's positive or negative, and that pisses me off.
I just wanted to clear up that one letter difference between the two names in that band.
For sure, and it's hilarious.
Or that Proj. Let's call it a Proj because, and we're just about to do the third one. I told him no gigs till we get 5 of them. When we get 5 of them, they're 12-inch 45s with 8 songs apiece. So after 40 tunes and 40 drummers, we'll finally do a gig because I've never done it that way.
Well, and what would that look like?
The whole idea is not to do reruns. I want to get involved in these projects that are pretty singular. They're pretty different from each other.
So would you do the show like how you have the records where you have different drummers kind of jumping in like song by song, or that's kind
of... We'll wait till we get there. We're still 24 songs out. Right?
Sounds good. Something to look forward to. So I want to. You talked about your time in the Stooges. I want to talk about that a little bit, but I want to preface it with just a quick story that I saw you playing bass with Jay Mascis and the Fog.
That had a lot to do with that reunion with the Stooges.
Right, and I went to that show. I was still in the Bay Area at the time. I went to that show in SF, brought a friend along.
I think it was Great American Music Hall.
Great American Music Hall, and we were sitting there, and I enjoyed the record, so I was just enjoying just the Jay Mascis and the Fog songs. But then,
I love the album. That's a great album. I think Jay plays everything on that record,
and it's completely underrated, I feel. But I'm sitting there, with my friend, and y'all bring Ron Ashton out, and I'm freaking out. My friend does have no idea who the Stooges are. He doesn't know from Ron Ashton, and I'm like, that's one of my favorite guitar players of all time from one of my favorite bands of all time. That dude's from the Stooges. And he's like, okay, cool.
You know, Conan, that Jay he was a drummer when he was younger.
Yeah.
He learned guitar because of Funhouse.
Wow.
So to get to play, I remember he told me, he goes, first you rip a guy off, then you play with him. We were in Ann Arbor on tour.
Well,
Ronnie had come and saw me with Minutemen and with fIREHOSE. The Colonel would take him to Greektown in Detroit. And anyway, I also made a film with him, a soundtrack called Velvet Gold Mine.
Oh, yeah. I want to talk about that, too.
So I kind of knew Ronnie, and Jay asked me, hey, you know him, why don't you call him up? we're in Ann Arbor, a blind pig, tell him to come down and jam with us. So I called Ronnie up, and he came on down. And the last third of the set, we did all Stooges songs. So Jay asked Ronnie, will you come on tour with us? And that's why you saw him in the city.
And it's crazy to think about now because I think just communication happens real quickly. So these kind of extemporaneous moments are sort of, everyone knows about them immediately. But I had no idea. And when I saw it, like,
Jay's kind of shy, you know. Jay don't like to tell a lot of people.
It blew my mind. It, like, in a great way. I just was like, I was simultaneously more excited, I think, than I had been in a very long time, and also just shocked at the same time. And it was beautiful. And then you got Steve McKay come out, play some saxophone too.
Right, but you live in there, you know. There's a town right near called Pacifica.
Of course, yeah.
And that's where, you know, because originally he's from Grand Rapids, but that's where he spent his last 30 years of his life.
And so can you tell me from your side, from your perspective, how, you know, Ron coming out and playing these Stooges songs with you and you having this relationship with him, having Velvet Goldmine, to how you ended up in the Dave Alexander role, playing in the goddamn Stooges when the Stooges came back?
Yeah, well, you know, Ronnie and Ig hadn't talked in 29 years.
Long time.
And, yeah, but Ig heard about, well, what happened was, it wasn't just Ronnie. After about a year of doing that, touring around with, doing J Masks of the Fog, a little bit of Dinosaur, and then the last third would be all Stooges with Ronnie. There was an Altamara party. Remember that festival?
Oh, yeah, of course.
There was one at UCLA in California, at SoCal, and Thurston was the, what do you call it? The
curator. I don't think you're supposed to use curator if it's not art, but whatever. That's what it's called. So screw it.
Well, art is music.
Yeah, exactly. I've had people that like are museum people who get really pissed off when I say that, but whatever. They can take a seat.
Curate just means put together the trip, right?
Yeah, organizer, whatever.
Yeah, so Thurston curated this thing. And Scotty was living in his truck at the time in Florida. So he said, why don't we rent Scotty a drum set? And Jay, what? You could play with both Ashton brothers. So we did that gig. And then we did some others in Europe. And that's where Ig heard about it. And he asked Ronnie to be on this album he had called Skull Ring.
Right.
They did 3 songs. And after that, they got invited to play Coachella. So I was on tour with my second man. I was in Tallahassee, and I get this phone call from Ig. And Ig says, it was right after sound check at the Cow House, at the second one, I think. And, hey, Mike, Ronnie says you're the man. I fucking couldn't believe it. I looked at the phone. It was like, what? And he says, would you do me a favor and wear a T-shirt instead of a flannel? And I said, fuck yeah. It's John Fogerty's idea.
Yeah.
You know, I said, what about Levi and Converse? And he said, that's strong. And I said, all right. And then he talked about, you know, trippy things about Light Show and drummer in lime green and bass player in bright orange, some nightmare shit, and he didn't want that to happen. Finally, he got to the music. He said, now look, however we end the songs, that's how we end them. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck's that mean?
Yeah, that's kind of a...
I to Memphis, we keep touring and stuff. You know, I play every day when I tour. So in Memphis, I leave them to fly to SoCal. There's one prac in Hollywood that we're going to do before this gig in the Coachella Valley, right? Actually, Indian Valley by Palm Springs. It's like on a polo field or anything, but this is in Hollywood, the practice, and I got sick on the plane going over. So, you know, but I'm not going to let them know. So it's just me, the Ashton brothers, and Ig in this practice room that's all mirrors. And he's running around, jumping around. It's like a fucking gig. And I'm thinking, oh, the first album, you know, because they were the Psychedelic Stooges, the gigs used to be just one big improvised thing.
Yeah. He had like the egg beater or whatever it was going, and like just whatever crazy stuff.
Blender.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry, Blender.
Blender and shit like this. But when they got signed, they had to write some songs at the Chelsea Hotel. The producer man was John Cale, and so the songs didn't have a lot of them didn't have any. They had fade outs. That's what. Half the songs on the first album fade out. So in my mind, I thought, oh, that's what he's talking about. We're going to end it, maybe, whatever, 8 times around and then on the one or something. It wasn't just crazy talk. Ig is like this.
Right, and I've always joked that anytime I hear a song with a fade out, I always say, like, yeah, and they went on for 5 minutes after that. But the engineer turned them off.
And then, those guys, a song, for example, a song like on the first album called Not Right, that song, it's not even, that's the first time they even practice it. Because when it goes to no, 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 when they're going to go that middle part, Scotty was going to jump to another part. And Ig is actually like,
giving him an instruction.
It's the vocal, it's the lyric, it ain't.
What a trip, wow.
You gotta understand, we wouldn't have had even a movement without Stooges.
Of course.
So I'm around these guys. Finally I'm the youngest guy in the band. I'm like a little brother. So my ears are like the size of an elephant, and they're all foam rubber sponges trying to soak up. I would ask those guys like 10 million questions a second.
Yeah.
I was always asking them about buttloads of shit. Because, here, it's like, how much shit is second, third, fourth, fifth hand, and I'm right at the source. It's like the blues guy on the porch, or me going to the well, and cranking up the rope, and here the bucket comes up. That water's from the well. Yeah. That's not from Sparklet's bottle. That's not from some dude's bladder. Kidney filtered, body temperature.
So, did you have anything that you could share with us that were like some great epiphanies that were, either didn't match maybe what you thought, or that was just like kind of a weird, cool.
For example, the bass line in Little Doll, something that I used after my sickness. By the way, that's 20 years coming up on Leap Day next month.
Oh man, is that long, huh?
I
Wow.
go through it in 4 years where I almost died of this shit. But that's one reason I got way into Stooges, because they had tubes in me so I couldn't play. It was the first time I had to stop since D. Boone Ma put me on bass, when we were boys. And I couldn't play, you don't use it, you lose it. So I did all the Stooges, atrophy, all the shit, so to get it back. And I found out the bass line, the Little Doll, Dave Alexander actually got that from Pharaoh Sanders, Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt.
Oh, no kidding.
So shit like that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
I tell you all kinds of stuff. I remember Ig one time was showing me around Ann Arbor with this rented Stang, and he stops in front of this apartment building. He said, Mike, right here, Ted Nugent and Buckskin asked me to join the Amboy Dukes. And it took everything I had to keep from busting up. I somehow got out, Ted. I think you got the wrong guy.
Wow.
That'd be shit like this, all kinds of stuff. It's just beautiful things, nothing hurtful or hateful or anything, just stuff I wasn't there. And, these guys, very, very interesting. They were pioneers. They were breaking ground for us later, yeah.
Well, and at least you had the lexicon of having played with Ron quite a bit and having played with Scott too, so it wasn't like you're coming in like totally blind, but still.
That's the one thing, Ronnie. Ronnie was the guy who stuck up for me to get me in, right? And when people asked Ronnie would say, "Well, Watt knows the song." It was again, it's Jay Mascis bringing him in. If you ask me, the whole reunion is because of Jay Mascis. I tried to tell Jim Jarmusch. I know he loves Stooges. He made this documentary.
Yeah, I saw it.
He talked to me twice. I've never seen it, but I tried to get that point to him, and it seemed like he understood it was about Jay. But Jay is so shy, he's not going to tell you that.
Right. Yeah, it was all right. Larry,
the drummer friend of mine, told me there was some kind of animation that was silly.
Yeah, here's how I'd put it. I'm a huge fan. I knew like a lot of, the stuff that was to be known from other sources beforehand. So there wasn't any great epiphanies or something. There's some cool stuff like Iggy and Jarmusch go to one of those halls they played with the MC5, and it's still there, and they're like reminiscing. Some of that stuff was cool, but it was cool. Like it wasn't amazing, but it was worthwhile. It was interesting.
Well, you make me still afraid to go see it, so I ain't.
Yeah, I'm
I remember him talking to me twice, and he was really sincere. I could tell the dude really loves Stooges.
That comes across. That certainly comes across.
Those guys, they got several movies going at the same time, so they kind of hand it off to another crew.
Yeah,
and maybe that's what I heard might have happened with this guy.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, but I'd say it's worth checking out. It's worth checking out.
Well, I just wanted to show my respect to them guys, and I just think it's just such a big part of the whole dealio. Hey, Hank Rollins just asked me to write a paragraph. I guess Rhino's going to put a vinyl version. Years ago they put out a CD version of all the takes of Funhouse.
Yeah, that's crazy. I got that, and that was wild to listen to.
I got it too, and now it's going to come out on vinyl, and then Funhouse itself is going to come out on a double 12-inch 45, 3 sides.
Hell yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so he asked me to do a paragraph, and when I think about listening to that, because I heard Funhouse before I heard the first record when I was a boy. I'm 13 in 1970, so my whole teen years is the 70s. But man, no one except D. Boone liked Stooges. That I knew, and Pedro, nobody liked them, like zero. Now you read Cream magazine, it seemed Richard Meltzer liked them. It seemed like right? What's his name? The editor man who died on the cough syrup.
Yeah,
Lester Bangs.
Bangs. I almost said Lance Bangs, which is a totally different dude.
No, they're not totally. He told me, Lance told me they're cousins.
Oh, are they actually related? Oh, what a trip. Okay.
They are related.
Okay, that's awesome.
Lance lives up in Portland. He comes up and sees my gigs, and I've known him a while.
Yeah,
married to
Corinne.
Yeah, Tucker. Yeah. So, Marshall Tucker's her son, right?
Yeah. What a trip that is.
Yeah, I got to chow with them. They're going to college now, the son and daughter, those guys. And what a great couple. And anyway, Lance told me Lester is related to him.
No kidding. Wow, okay. So, yeah, but other than Lester Bangs, Richard Meltzer and stuff, no one's listening to the Stooges down in San Pedro. It's sort of...
Yeah. Well, we're kind of a backwater, and... it just was the way it was, And in fact, we didn't know this because at that time, early 70s, Stooges, came to Hollywood and was living there and playing the whiskey. We didn't even know.
Yeah.
Because all we knew was arena rock. We didn't know about clubs till the movement.
And that's something else that, younger cats also may not realize that, it wasn't... Stuff
it's weird time. This weird time we were in the 70s. Like the Stooges, they knew about clubs in the 60s. And 80s kids know about clubs and stuff, late 70s because of the punk movement. But 70s kids kind of know mostly about arena rock.
Yeah.
And that 70s, like I was saying earlier about glitter and glam, and a lot of it was girls.
Yep.
A lot of the movement before hardcore up in Hollywood was girls. They were in a lot of the bands. They were a lot of the gig goers. Now, the scene was very small, but still, it was a lot of women. Kay was running the prac pad at the Mask, 17 years old.
Yeah.
Incredible. She just got an Oscar for that Mad Max thing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I forgot about that. That was a big moment that I tried to explain to a couple friends of mine. They're like, no, you don't understand. She's been doing
people
cool shit for forever.
Even the name Stooges, these guys are retarded and shit. And not at all. In fact, people were kind of weird and they kind of didn't fit in, and that's probably why they gravitated that scene, parallel universe. But Ig with culture, and Ronnie with history, and Scotty with nature, Brother Steve with politics, and later on James Williamson. Interesting people.
Yeah,
they're men. The road man, Henry McGrogan, Josh, Max, the helper guys, Eric Fisher, the road. interesting guys. And then in the scene too, this is where I meet Raymond Pettibone, people like Don Bowles, Pat Smear, and can you imagine getting to be in a band with Pat Smear, Dave Grohl, incredible.
Right.
These are people from the old days, and there's a reason why it wasn't just a bunch of losers, It's funny. I mean, a lot of the stuff was self-deprecating, a lot of the humor, and you made fun of yourself and stuff, but why not,
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on it a couple times, but also, the music itself was like less uniform. It wasn't like that, like, okay, you had to have a real fast beat and like, you had to have, it had to be like this. Like, it was before sort of rules got applied to it.
Yeah, but hilarious thing about that was the big A's painted on the jackets. Like I was saying, like we Jammy Kano for Minutemen wasn't just a slogan. We tried to live it. So where was the anarchy part about everybody wearing the same clothes, playing the same song?
Yeah, that's a uniform. You might as well go join the police force.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious, right? It was pretty obvious. But you're also dealing with kids in some ways. And so, yeah, I remember the Warped Tour, I did some of those gigs. Hey, what, you're playing the Hot Topic stage. And I was like, deep into that. And this guy said, no, man, Hot Topic ain't what you think. It's a store at the mall where you buy punk clothes.
Yeah, exactly. At the mall.
I fucking couldn't believe it. Humans will co-opt anything.
Go get some chains and anarchy patches down over by the Jamba Juice.
Conan. It didn't start with the movement. Come on. Pat Boone sold many more Tutti Fruttis than Little Richard. That's
true.
That's like in the middle 50s.
Yep. It's nothing new under the sun. You're right about that.
Yeah. So shit gets co-opted. Shit gets abused. It's just the human way.
So talk to me about when you played that first Stooges gig with Iggy, and you got the shirt, the Dave Alexander shirt, right?
With the Aston Brothers. It's what Brother Steve without any prac. He just got up there and blew. In 1970, when fucking Ig goes to Brother Steve, he says, blow! Fucking, he blew, man. Oh, Steve! Blow! Man, I couldn't believe it. For one thing, the wind was blowing. It's out in the desert. It blew Ronnie's fucking amps over.
Oh, shit. Really? Wow.
Put it down sideways. Yeah. And like I was saying, I got sick on the plane flight over, so I didn't let them know. I was shaking like a leaf before we went on. And Flea and Ian Mackay were there giving me hugs. They thought they could get their body temperature in there to warm me up so I wouldn't shake.
Oh, man.
And then he said, there's a nurse with vitamin B, niacin, that can help with this sickness shit for the gig, at least try to get the shakes out. And so shot me in the ass with this vitamin B, and after about 20 minutes, have you ever had that stuff? It makes you all hot and itchy.
Oh, man.
They put me in a golf cart. I went up on the stage, and we're playing it. I remember Ig stopped us in Dirt. He goes, are we in the right key? Because sometimes on those big stages,
you can't tell. Yeah,
phase problems with the sounds, and so he couldn't tell. I said, yeah, we're in the right key. And he said, start it again. I couldn't believe it. And Conan, I thought that was going to be the only gig. When I heard there was going to be another gig, it blew my mind. And then it turned into 125 months.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it started off being like, hey, we're going to do this thing. And then, you're sitting here thinking like, man, I feel like crap. I'm going to be doing this thing with like some of my childhood heroes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the adrenaline after about the second song kicked in. But it was really that nice, and that kind of helped.
Yeah.
And then after that gig actually burned that sickness out, because I rejoined my guys, my second man in Raleigh, and we did 35 gigs straight. So if I was so fucking sick, how did I do fucking 35 gigs? That gig was really, what do you call that? A cleanser.
Healing power of rock and roll, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, just to reiterate, like you're going through doing your own shows, your own tour while this is going on. You get the nod to join up with goddamn Stooges.
Yeah.
The response goes well. People flip their shit over it.
Well, the response is a trip. Like, they're 11 years older than me, right? 11, 10 years. So you expect maybe the gig goers to be in the,
Same age.
but they weren't.
Yeah, they were younger, right?
And younger than me. Because it was people, I think, younger people, where did our movement come from? Captain Beefheart ain't doing gigs anymore. But now these guys are. We can see at least somebody who was doing this stuff before they had a name for it.
Yep. And I think it's interesting to me, too, because, I'm I worked at a record store, so I got turned on to all the good music, pretty early on. By the time I didn't discover punk rock till I was like 17 or so, but I made up for lost time pretty quick. But I knew the Stooges, but a bunch of other people I felt like they ought to, they never do. Then I would throw them a copy of Funhouse and they'd have their mind blown. But I feel like after that first Stooges show, people kind of oh, let's check this out. Like maybe people that should have known or were like, oh, I've heard that name before. And it kind of brought the Stooges closer to where they should have been all along in rock history, if that makes any sense, at least from an outsider perspective.
I mean, like a validator.
Yeah, it either reminded people or history. Stooges were ahead of the curve, right? And
Absolutely.
I feel like it got to the point where history kind of caught up with them, and just by being a live band, it kind of allowed people to sort of be like, oh yeah, this stuff is great. This is awesome. And I feel like, again, not like that's going to be worldwide acclaim necessarily, or, millions and millions of dollars necessarily, but having been a fan from before and after it existed again as a live band, the difference was noticeable, at least amongst younger folks, amongst kids.
Yeah. It wasn't like a revival oldies act.
No, not at all. I mean, obviously, it was. There's been.
And if you've ever been part of something Migg's part of, he never works that shit that way anyway, man. He works. The idea of working the room. I mean, I remember we were playing this racetrack in England, Donning, up by Leeds, or it was in the. I think they call it Midlands or middle part. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he goes, Mike. I feel like a shorter order cook. It's like I got to get everybody's order. You want to shake with that? Okay, what flavor? He's playing the gig to each dude.
Yeah.
I mean, that's his ethic. And and me, who's a true believer. What better kind of sensei cat, who's teaching by example, and he's got you on board, and he's the fucking bow of the boat, and he's a hard charger. What else can you do but,
gotta step
collaborate? Up. Yeah, co-conspire and plow.
Yeah,
and I swear, those gigs seemed like they were 2-3 minutes long. They would fucking pass me. I would have to focus on him completely because it was so easy for me to get lost in the tunes. I heard as a boy.
Of course.
But I do that. I had a responsibility, Conan. I had to be there to help deliver them. I couldn't be the listener. Right. I had, especially that first gig, I almost lost it several times because, I'm hearing this shit, but I'm also part of making it. That was really a mind blow. So I would just focus on Ig. I wouldn't look at the gig goers. I'd look over at Ronnie, Scotty, Brother Steve. But mainly I was looking at Ig just to keep the fucking focus.
Right. I mean, I would say Iggy's one of the all-time great front people in rock and roll, by a pretty large margin, he's a firecracker. Even all these years later.
Yeah, he's all wild and crazy, but he also is hearing every note.
You can tell he used to play drums. You can tell that that's how he started.
Well, he taught Scotty so he could be a frontman after they saw the Velvet Underground.
Yep.
What I found out.
He's very rhythmic. He's very aware of rhythm.
Well, the name comes from playing drums for a band called the Iguana.
Yep, Iggy Iguana. I used to have that record.
Yeah, that's where it comes from. And I never called him this, but his real name was James, Jim. I never called him that. I always called him Ig because, I was never Stooge. Yep. I was there to help them out. Yeah, it was a real interesting thing when they got the Hall of Fame award, Scotty, at the kiosk, when he delivers a little spiel. He said Mike was never a Stooge, but he could have been one.
Oh,
That was
man.
very kind. That was very kind because that's accurate.
Yeah.
You know, I was very careful never to assume that I was a student. I was there to help out. I was there to give them my best notes, my best plan. I wasn't there to assume like I was there.
Right.
Because my pop told me, that wasn't spelled by accident, boy. When you make an ass out of you and me because you assume.
Right. Yeah, that'll.
So I was there to help out, but like I told you at the beginning of my Stooge story, very interesting classroom to serve aboard.
Well, but it also ties into some of the stuff you were talking about earlier about, there being stuff to learn about different roles that you play in music, whether you're like the person orchestrating the whole thing or you're just, driving the engine.
or just what when you did the time clock, you punched in your card. Those guys are from an earlier shift.
Right, exactly. Oh, yeah, okay.
They're from an earlier shift. There's things I could never know except by being with them because it was a whole different thing. I can imagine what the Stooges had to go through, They didn't have, in a way, it was really neat then getting to do those gigs starting in 2003 because those ones they did in the 60s into the middle 70s, a lot of them were beat downs. People gave them a lot of negative shit.
Yeah.
Not appreciative crowds.
Yeah, and it's again, now that the Stooges have sort of like reclaimed, if not exactly where they ought to be in rock history, they have like, some recognition and like, a whole new generation of fans and stuff. It's hard if you haven't done the research, you just think like, oh yeah, this is like, really killer rock and roll. It's like punk before it was punk. But, no one was looking for that at the time. No one was like, rolling out the red carpet.
Yeah, they did all that mind blow from Little Richard and Sherry Lee Lewis had to get tamed down. They didn't want that anymore. I don't know. Maybe it was a marketing decision. All I know is the Stooges were true believers in rock and roll, and they let the fucking freak flag fly. They also loved music. They listened to all kinds of different stuff.
Well, sure. Listen to Ron's playing. Listen to like, some of the stuff he's doing is like total, was it a Monavishu orchestra, kind of like chimey, like open notes that kind of go and like have this sort of like, just bringing it back to what we were talking at the beginning, almost like a drone effect.
Yeah, right. We're talking about one part. TVI is one chord.
Yep. I'm specifically, but I didn't have to tell you which song because you knew that was going to be TVI that I'm talking about.
Okay. And then something like Funhouse, Ig asked Brother Steve to play like Maceo on L. They're trying to do Jim Brown. They're doing funk.
Yeah.
And TVI, by the way, the drums, that's snare on the one. That's Motown. I mean, there's so much different stuff going on with Stooges stuff.
Right. Nuance stuff, like big nuance. That's why when people say it's dumb music, I'm like, you're dumb for saying that.
Absolutely. Even those claps, the way, because Ig knows how to syncopate. Listen to the claps in No Fun and really interesting stuff. I mean, incredible. And some stuff, simple is the way you do it. It's econo. Okay, maybe the skill level is wherever it's at, but also what is really making connect with the body and the mind? What really resonates? Right. Is it always like some complicated Escher painting in the brain? Or is it something fundamental like a fucking, high voltage cord falling on top of you?
Right, and exactly. And I feel like in that way, like I've seen, like whatever, and reviewers and stuff will say like the word primal with the Stooges. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's, if you stop and think about it, I guess that is, it's primal music, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's dumb music either.
No, not at all. And then, they had to ask the Three Stooges permission to use the name. And they agreed to it. They said, just don't call it the Three Stooges.
That's awesome.
Because, they were Stooges, they were psychedelic Stooges.
The psychedelic Stooges first. Yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah, they shortened it to Stooges. And in fact, Ronnie took care of Larry at the Hollywood home. No one would visit him, and he'd go get him cigarettes and stuff.
Larry Fine, yeah. That's. Larry. He's it's kind of it's interesting that there's a whole kind of unknown, like late life Larry Fine that's, you know, be worthy of like, I don't know, a documentary or like I guess it could be a biopic at this point, right?
Yeah.
Interesting dude. I mean, they all were. They all were very smart guys.
Not a brother. He's the one that's not a brother of the original.
Right. And, you know, it would be interesting to, I don't know, I guess some people from Hollywood listen to this show. Maybe someone will pick up on that and make a movie about Larry Fine. You know, just complete change of subject here. So when I came to the Minutemen, I came in through Double Nickels on the Dime, which of course you named that because it was, you know, what is that Sammy Hagar song was, yeah, I can't drive 55, right?
He said he couldn't drive 55.
Right.
And people said, look, he's going to drive crazy and make safe music. Let us drive safe and make crazy music.
And I always thought that was like such an amazing ethos, because it's true. And that's kind of a wild record. Like there's like some, you know, there's a lot of songs, ended up being a double record. And there's a lot of stuff that you guys did on that. You know, you got the you know, songs like Vietnam and, you know, This Ain't No Picnic. They're just, you know, sharp, concise, like Minutemen songs. But you also have, you know, the song, you know, Punk Rock Saved Our Life. Like it's kind of almost sounds like dudes hanging out by the fire or something along those lines. Like they're all over the place. There's like kind of almost free jazz.
Yeah, the little song format we got from this band from England called Wire.
Yep.
And you know, we had learned off records before the movement, you know, and so we didn't want our T-Rex and Blue Oyster Cult Creedence influences be too obvious. So we thought that little song format would make it harder for people to know that we were all tainted and stained by the older music.
Like R&B and acid rock.
Now, but we were really worried about that because we love bands like Wire and the 100 Flowers who just started making a band without ever practicing.
Right. Yeah, so they came up with a sort of wild sound all on their own that, you know, is now emulated and whatnot. But really, it's just they didn't know that wasn't how you were supposed to do it. You know, they just came up with their own stuff.
Yeah, but own is kind of weird, like, you know, like the set of words. I mean, Finnegan's Wake is a great book, but a little hard to understand.
Yeah, it's definitely something that takes a little bit effort.
You know, so there are stuff that kind of we share that aren't exactly original, but like the allegory I was giving you about the novel, where you cannot invent one word, but it can still be pretty original.
Right, and it's not.
That's what we were trying to do with the Minutemen, by all these kind of motifs you're talking about, like whatever, playing slow, playing fast, playing you know, Latin, playing hard rock or jazz, and all these different ways of, it's all vocabulary to try to. I remember D. Boone saying, "Man, let's do whatever we can, but somehow we're still the Minutemen," whatever that meant.
No, and it worked. I mean, again, coming at it from the place of a fan, when I got that record, because that was the first one I ever got from you guys, I actually came to it somewhat late. Like I already knew from you know, Black Flag and you know, just Germs, even like you know,
the record wasn't 100% our idea. We had an album done in November of 1983, and then the next month the Huskers came to town and recorded
Zen Arcade, right?
Zen Arcade. And we thought, wow, they made a double album. We should write a bunch of songs so we can have a double album too. So in March, a couple months later, we recorded a bunch more songs, and that's how it came about.
Kind of like a friendly arms race.
Yeah, or just like, wow, you did that? We're going to try to do that too. Yeah, or some kind of like game of chicken.
So
Jimmy Dean and shit, right? They're going to the cliff with the car.
Right, and Rebel Without a Cause and all that, yeah.
Yeah, but both of us jump out. We don't go over the cliff, at least.
But one of the things when I
ended up with double records, but there would have been no double nickels on the dime without a Husker Du Zen Arcade. They had a whole plot and everything. Okay, this kid at the video arcade. Now our things, both bunches of songs are written at different times, so we had to invent concepts. So one of them was the Sammy Hagar thing, like you talked about. Another one we got from this band Pink Floyd, who had an album called Ummagumma, where one album was live, but the other one, they each had 25% of the vinyl real estate.
Right.
We did the same thing, but we used, Joe Carducci said, why don't you use your car sounds? So we used sounds from our cars, and then we each had a solo song. So D. Boone played Spanish nylon string, Georgie beat on some oil cans and whistled, and I used a landlady's note about the guy who took the cover picture, Dirk Vandenberg. That's
right, I forgot about that, yeah.
His shower's leaking on his downstairs neighbor. So the landlady, because D. Boone would sing my lyrics kind of spacey. So I thought, okay.
Yeah, I got something for you.
Yeah, we'll use this. So that's how the unifying concepts, we had to come about it after the fact.
So for me, coming at it as a fan, and this is just the catch point for what I was talking about earlier, is just like the Residents, I enjoyed the music a lot, but I really was impressed by the fact that you jump all around to these different styles, but it all sounded very much like the same band, while also sounding kind of crazy. And I thought that was very inspiring to me.
Well, you know what? That was we succeeded with you then, because that was the mission.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of times, a lot of the bands I was listening to, it's like, oh, they, whatever, oh, you're doing that again, huh? Like, God bless the Ramones,
well,
I love them, but.
Well, no, but there's also the other thing. Here's the reggae song. Here's the ska song. You can get too
far down the line, exactly.
Yeah, it's total form, right? It's total form. So that's a weird thing about music, or artistic expression in any kind. You want signifiers, you want things that telegraph messages, but you don't want complete forms, right?
Right.
Because then it gets too lazy thinking.
It's a rare band that can pull that off, and that almost.
Yeah, you wear the Carmen Miranda hat. It's hard not to look like Carmen Miranda.
So, when you talk about like the Minutemen discography, there's those early stuff. I feel like it all kind of it's so intrinsically tied into your story and how you and D. Boone kind of came to punk rock and like found the movement, right?
Yeah.
How were those early records made? Like were they fairly quick affairs?
Yeah, they're like gigs. I mean, for one thing, they cost a lot of money compared to what we had. Okay, it would be $75 for used tape to get 15 minutes. Okay, and when going at midnight to 6 o'clock because that downtime was half price.
Right.
We record these things in order so we didn't have to spend money on sequencing.
So you would just play the record like how it was on the record.
They're like gigs. They're gigs in front of microphones.
Right.
Never got involved with the engineering or the production. We let either Ethan James or Spot do that because we thought they had the knowledge. They're not asking to play the drums or the bass, so we're not going to ask to work their fucking knobs and buttons.
Right.
So that's how they were done. They were done really econo. We made Buzzer Howl for $50. We made double nickels on the dime. I paid for that $1,100. Ethan James mixed all 45 songs in one night.
Oh my Jesus!
A half inch. No, it was a quarter-inch 8-track Otari machine. So they only had 8 tracks to mix.
Oh man!
Half of those was drums.
Yeah. Of course.
So things were done really econo in those days. You had to. Like I said, it wasn't just a slogan. It was a way of life.
Well, and I know from
when I said jam econo, it wasn't just to paint on a jacket.
Right, right. It was an ethos.
We come from working class. We come from econo families, so we got used to this stuff. So we just thought, why do you have to live up to some rock star expectation? We'll just do what it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
Make sure the tent's big enough for the dream, and that's it.
And
we got Now, we got the idea. Ford called their vans this. They call them Econo lines.
Oh, I know very well. That's my van of choice. I've had the same Econoline. I've got it when it had 17,000 miles. It has 240,000 miles on it now. It's all well maintained.
This guy, yeah, that's how they last. They stopped making them in 2014.
I know, man.
Yeah, the Econoline, though, the way, they were called Falcons at first because they were built on those chassis, but in the early 60s. But the idea of this is how we get to the gig. This is how we work to the town. We use a vehicle called the Econoline. Like, we're going to make it to your town because it doesn't always mean the cheapest, but it means the most bang for your buck. So you don't have to buy it twice, right? If you buy it right, you buy it once. That's Econo. Econo doesn't mean the lowest price because that means you might have to buy it again, which ends up costing more, right?
Yep.
So Econo is the most bang for your buck, which if you grow up with not a lot of bones, what do they call it? Stretch it. You learn how to stretch it.
Mm-hmm.
They call the shit when you put the fucking bread in the meatloaf, you stretch it, right? That's,
right, you stretch it out, put it in the soup. Yeah.
Right? That's an Econo technique, right? It's not really paying the least. It's just getting the most you can get with what resources you have. Life deals you a hand. So it's how you play that hand. That's the idea of jamming Econo.
Well, and it's interesting that, when especially, I come from like a working poor background, so it just was such a natural fit. It was like, oh yeah, of course. Like that's like, what else would you do? That I never heard articulated aloud though before I started
Really,
paying attention to you guys.
way, it's not really an option, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't. Yeah, what I'm like, right? The trust fund is not necessarily going to be available.
So we learned by doing. So a lot of that we didn't pick. That's just the circumstance. But fuck, I mean, it worked.
Yeah, I
why
mean,
throw it away? Why graduate to some fake kind of royalty? Fuck that.
Well, and I thought it was interesting too that you made some decisions early on. D Boon's guitar sound is very kind of treble heavy. You had the low end, he had the high end, kind of just helped separate it out. Like it gave it a very unique sound.
That was his idea. Well, he got the idea kind of from the R&B guys, the way they play rhythm guitar and funk, and with soul music. They kind of clipped it. They kept it trebly so you could hear James. You could hear the bass and the drums, and that was. D. Boon said the lyrics were just thinking out loud. He thought the real political thing of the Minutemen was making his guitar trebly so you could hear the drums and the bass better. So it would be more egalitarian, equal.
Right.
Because with arena rock, there was a huge hierarchy. And, of course, the guitar player had the power in his hands. And me and Georgie were into it.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you be? But, it worked out well because not just... with the songs themselves and with the compositions, but how it comes across, like first time you hear it, it kind of like makes you kind of cock your ear a little bit and be like, oh wow, that's different, that's interesting, and it kind of gives you a different hook to it. There
was a band in England besides Wire. Wire helped us with the format, but when it came to that stuff, especially using that crazy guitar, was the Pop Group. Yeah. This. And playing funk and, Bootsy Collins kind of stuff on the bass and drums like Clyde Stubblefield, music's music. These people we met at the gigs, they knew about all kinds. Raymond Pettibone played me Love Supreme. I thought John Coltrane, I knew he was older. I didn't know he was dead. I thought he was an older punk rocker. I did not
awesome.
know he was from the 60s. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Arena rock was so shallow of an experience when it comes to music. There were so many other bands and ways of doing music, I found out. And it was from these guys showing up on the weekends at these little clubs wearing funny clothes and having funny names.
Yeah,
they were my teachers. They were my fucking teachers, especially guys like Raymond Pettibone.
Yeah.
Or Richard Meltzer with his Hepcats from Hell radio show. Sometimes Don Bowles would be a guest on there. They'd play records, that blow my fucking mind. It really was the classroom thing actually started with movement. I miss meeting all these people. When I came from Virginia, all I knew was Pedro guys.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, I'm meeting guys from all of, SoCal's like 150 towns.
Yeah, people that that aren't from there maybe
don't know anybody from anywhere, right? And they're all eating at
different world.
little, Chinese restaurant in Chinatown to see some crazy bands play. It was just it was totally like going to a weird kind of college or school. It really is. A lot of what I'm made up nowadays, it's from those lessons, those classes I took. Night
classes. Exactly. Well, and I think it's cool too that you do the Watt from Pedro show to kind of give back a little bit.
We found out about the movement.
Yeah.
Especially from the Black Flag guys. It's not just making a band. It's about making a label. It's about making a fanzine. Why shouldn't you have a radio? It's about expression.
Exactly.
Greg Ginn had a ham radio thing going when he was a young guy. So he got used to talking to people out of town. And I don't know, this idea, Keith Morris, a Circle Jerk singer, he had a Circle Jerk tour. He had a show on KBLT, which was a pirate radio station in Silver Lake, about 30 miles north of here. East part of Hollywood, kind of. And he asked me to guest for him. And I did this for 2 years on Friday nights for 2 hours. I'd never been on that side of the microphone before. But I liked it. But FCC came down and shut that station down after some investigation. So I no longer had a show. And then I was on tour and conquered at some dude's house in Portland. And they were just starting a web hosting company. They said, well, we'll put your radio show on the internet, and anybody with a computer can hear your show. Because the funny thing about the Watt from Pedro show in Silver Lake, you couldn't hear it in Pedro. It only went about 5 miles.
That's that's ironic, yeah.
You could hear it all over the fucking... You could hear it in Sarajevo if you had the right connect with the internet and a computer. So I said I went for it. Now in May, it'll be 19 years with Brother Matt. 627 shows. They're all archived, twfps.com. I just did one yesterday. I try to do one a week. But the whole idea is to show people, because I like to have guests on and talk about their journey through music, and I'm trying to show people there's buttloads of way to have a journey through music. In fact, there's not two ways that are the same.
Totally. And that's not to put too fine a point on it, that's kind of what I do with this show as well. And I think a lot of times the telling of the story and how you get there can really help give perspective for folks and be interesting, especially for folks that also consider themselves creative, but it's also just interesting in general. And when you give voice to those that, Terry Gross from Fresh Air maybe doesn't have on speed dial or something along those lines, that's a service. And that's part of punk rock as far as I'm concerned. Yeah,
absolutely.
At least
that thing we're talking about, taking turns, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So, and it's interesting too, because I've run into people that kind of feel like, doing something other than just the music diminishes. And I think it's the exact opposite. I think being a part of community, you're either in it for the ego or you're in it for, adding something to this world to make a better place it was when you came in.
Yeah, I mean, my buddy Raymond Pettibone, we collaborate on some music, but a lot of his expression is with visual, and it just is.
He's an amazing visual artist, yeah.
And some of us do it with sound, and some of us do it with, there's a lot of ways to do this stuff, and it's strange when it gets all reduced to certain kind of channels and product and packages. And I think it's kind of getting into the same thing we were talking about with the herd mentality and having different labels. What was your word? Uniforms.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't say it lightly. You know what I mean?
No, Conan, that's a great way to put it. And real simple. People right away get the idea. Uniform.
Yeah.
It could mean clothes, but it also means like uni, one. Form. The way. About the way, I think it'd be better like what Scotty taught me, this thing called the Tao. With the way, you can't really talk about the way. To talk about the way kind of fouls it up.
Right. That screws up the process.
So it's completely heads on tails from uniform.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one way. No, there's the way. And that's kind of mysterious because we're all on a journey. But we're all waving to each other while we're on this journey, right?
Yeah.
They're not really totally alone. It's not totally together either. It's this kind of trippy thing.
It's true, and it's you know, it's very invigorating to talk to someone with your experiences that has such a you know, almost Eastern mindset about it. Like it's certainly akin to mine. It's something that I think is important and that, you know, tends to get lost among the discussion sometimes.
Yeah, because, you know, some of it's the values. You know, there's this shrill voices that are always yelling at us, like if you're not winning, if you're not telling people what to do, then somehow you're a loser.
Right.
So we're always having to battle these ridiculous, pseudo values. But, you know, a farmer would tell you, Conan, if you want a good crop, maybe use a lot of manure. So I say, bring it, motherfuckers.
Oh man, that's a closing line if ever I heard one. I will say there's one other thing. It's might seem odd, but there's a question I usually ask all the folks that I have on. Why do you do what you do, Mike?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, it's just kind of like when people ask me what kind of bass player I am. I say I'm D. Boone's bass player. I think the momentum of playing with him as a boy is just keep shoving me and doing what I'm doing. It's weird. Part of it's mystery, but part of it's building on the stuff. You know, like we were talking about links in the chain, but not a chain that binds you. It's just some trippy connects. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm like on a trajectory in a way. I got thrown into this momentum situation, but I'm not unaware. Right. And so I'm looking for teachers. I'm really convinced everybody's got something to teach me if I just keep my fucking mind open enough. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Trying to keep the fucking mind open.
Well, we appreciate it, brother. And we appreciate that you lead by example as well. And glad you're out there doing it. And it's been a real treat to have you on, man.
Oh, you're most kind, Conan, truly.
So you got a bunch of dates coming up, as per normal, as we talked about way earlier on.
I got a tour coming March, April with MSSV, mainsteamstopvalve.com, Mike Baguette in Knoxville, Tennessee, Steve Hodges, who played drums on my first opera, the trippy 25-year, come back around to play with him again. And, and playing bass line, somebody wrote for me for the situation.
Right. Should be interesting. Yeah.
It's like somebody writing a play for you, right? Writing a role in a play for you. It's that's kind of new for me. And then in the September, October, I'll have a Europe tour with the El Sueño de Mayo guys, the Sailor's Dream in Europe. So those are the first two big tours I got for this year. And I'm also recording a second band album and a Missing Men album. These are two projects I put together for a second and third opera. They succeeded on those missions, and now I'm going to make albums for those guys that stand on their own.
Nice.
That's my acute plans. Also, I'm doing an opera with Petra Hayden, where it's not my libretto, it's Charlie Plymell. It's called Planet Chernobyl, and it's called Pelican Man. Me and Pet's going to do a violin and mandolin and singing, and I'm just going to do bass.
Wow. Okay. And
finally, not weird, but a little different. It's kind of like a half dose where it's me playing bass and Karen Schomer doing poems. And that's called The Jaded Azurites. If you come to MikeWatt.com, all these projects are up in the news section.
And then, just go to the Hoot page, check it out. I got to say, man.
The Hoot page is what, 25 years old?
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Right? It'd be drinking age.
It's one of the only websites that's drinking age, you're right. I got to say, dude, you're like one of the only people that, people often say that they get exhausted just hearing about what all I'm up to, but, you definitely take the prize as far as that goes. My hat's off to you, brother.
I'm the exhauster.
In a good way,
You're very kind, Conan. Thanks for having me aboard. And I think you gave me a chance to talk about stuff that's really important to me, so thank you.
I'm really glad you took the chance to do it, man. Thanks so much for being on. Let's do it again sometime.
Okay, brother.
All right, brother. Take care. There he goes. Wow. The man, the myth, the legend. Mr. Mike Watt. All right, let's hear a tune.
Our band could be your life. Real names be proved. Me and Mike Watt, we played for years. Punk rock changed our lives. We learned punk rock in Hollywood. Drove up from Pedro. We were fucking corn dogs. We'd go drink and pogo. Mr. Narrator, this is Bob Dylan to me. My story could be his songs. I'm his soldier child. Our band of scientist rock. But I was E. Bloom, and Richard Hell, Joe Strummer, and John Doe. Me and Mike Watt playing the guitar.
Wow. All right. Thought that was pretty good. Oh, boy. I hope you guys enjoyed that half as much as I did. Yeah, man.
Is this thing on?
Punk rock changed my life. Anyway, as we established, all things Mike Watt, go to the Hoot page, hootpage.com. Tour dates. Records, all that. The name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal.
Is this thing on?
It airs Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, 5 p.m. Pacific. RadioNope.com. Say yes to Nope. RadioNeutron.com for the archives.
Can you hear me now?
Live listeners, Music On with Music Off's up next.
As we come to the close of our broadcast day.
I just want to thank Mike Watt for coming on the show. That was bucket list for this show. I feel pretty good about it.
This is my farewell transmission.
Check out the Watt from Pedro show. Find that on the Hoot page.
Signing off. Mr. and Mrs. America, all the ships at sea.
If you enjoy the show,
anyone within the sound of my
save it on
voice.
Spotify, rate it in Stitcher and iTunes, whatever. It helps people find it. Spread the word. Like it on Facebook. All that helps.
I've got 50,000 watts of power.
Thank you to all those that already do that.
I wanna ionize
never
the
hurts.
air.
We've got some good stuff coming up.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
And as always,
Can you hear me now?
if you listen to the show, you know what's coming.
Out on Route 128, the dark and lonely.
Take it easy.
I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner! If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. There is no special girl! It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, radio. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?